All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Heart and Hustle podcast. I'm incredibly excited to bring my guest to you today because he's overcoming some huge challenges in healthcare when it comes to the patient experience, but more importantly, how people navigate their healthcare experience. Today, I've got Ephraim, the CEO and founder of Hutano. Thank you so much for coming today, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Keenan. I really appreciate it.
So one thing I was looking at was your background. So you started as a physical therapist. So what was kind of your drive to get into the PT space in general? And then what type of challenges do you think you were overcoming in entering into that space? Do you see any gaps in the marketplace or needing to meet patients with better, I would say, physical therapy? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so, if you go back like maybe 15 years before I became a physical therapist, I was actually in IT.
Okay.
So physical therapy was there's a midlife crisis at 33. That's not to say I'm going to live to 66. I plan on going further than that. But anyways, it was at 33, I just decided I'd had enough of IT and I was going to move into something else. And medicine was the first stop, and that just didn't fit my bill. Mm-hmm. Physical therapy became the thing that I wanted to do. And part of it is just the ability to bring wellness without medicating people and just trying to optimize people's body movements. Because it turns out at the end of the day, what really matters, no matter what, is can you move? And if you can move optimally? So that became my heart and soul at the point.
Yeah. And one thing I notice is when you're dealing with in the PT space in general, I had a major knee injury back in 2019, ruptured my patellar tendon and had to go to PT for the first time to actually recover. And that entire experience for me was very scary because it was the first time that my body really let me down. And I really leaned on my PT to show me that it's okay, I can rebuild this muscle and actually kind of get my mobility back as well.
Right.
Was that part of your overall wellness experience and trying to help people get back to where they were?
Yeah, so it's love and hate, right? I mean, your PT, you're going to hate them because they cause pain. But at the same time, that's exactly, the drive for most PTs and definitely myself as well is getting people from those kinds of injuries and then getting back to their normal life, whatever normal life looks for you, being able to restore mobility and get a person back to, I'm sure you're back to fully recovered now. But definitely that was a big drive. At the time, I was getting back into sports. So seeing people recover from an injury back to making money doing sports or otherwise was always a drive for me.
Yeah. Were you dealing with professional athletes when you say making money playing sports?
No. So my initial group of people that I worked with was pediatrics. So I worked with little people literally from birth to 18 years old. And within that, there's a lot of either diseases that they were born with that they had nothing to do with except for nature. And then, of course, there were very active young people, from baseball throwers to you name it. So getting them back to health and back to health. And then beyond that, I went into the opposite side, which is geriatrics, the really old people. And interestingly enough, people over 65, I'm getting closer to that age, so I shouldn't say too much about them people. But they are athletes in certain ways, right? Being able to play another round of golf is more meaningful for somebody who's 65 than someone who's, say, 45. Because at 45, you can always rebound and come back. But at 65, you're going, this might be the last one. So those became my athletes. And then later on in life, because I'm a runner, I've spent more time taking care of runners and optimizing their running abilities for as long as they can. But I didn't start off with athletes.
Yeah. So do you have an inspiring story where you helped somebody kind of overcome some of the challenges that they had, and then when they first engaged with you, but then after they were kind of in their best self again?
Yeah. So I was just sharing this story with Tasha just this morning. We had a gentleman back in my very early years. I think I'd only been practicing for a year. We had been told that he could never walk. Walking was just out of the question completely. And as a young therapist, you always think you can change the world. And sure enough, when I met him, he was showing just a little bit of movement. This gentleman was about 70 years old. Long story short, with just sheer determination on his part and my part, we were able, after 7 years of not walking, we were able to get him to stand, walk, eventually drive his own vehicle. So
wow.
it was the the turning point for me, I always knew I wanted to be a physical therapist, but after that, I knew this was my calling. It wasn't just a job that I was doing. So that change in somebody who literally had been convinced by everybody in the medical field that they were not going to walk, and then all of a sudden their family and seeing them walk and drive their own vehicle was just amazing. So,
oh my gosh, that must have been such an emotional experience for you.
Oh, it really was. It really was. I tell that story to my students all the time. Like, this what patients were told, they hold on to their heart. So if a physician or a physical therapist tells a patient you will never walk again, people internalize that and they'll take that for a lifetime. And sometimes you cause them to be disabled when they don't need to be disabled.
Yeah.
And then comes somebody who challenges that thought process and says, maybe we missed something the first time. Maybe we're missing something right now. But turning somebody's way of thinking from I couldn't walk, I can't walk, I will never walk, to maybe there's something here. I think that's the power of being a physical therapist, is that we're willing to look at those incremental movements over a very long period of time and then wait for the big win, which usually takes a very long time to come. Yeah. So it's an amazing profession when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that you help people kind of compound little achievements until you get that breakthrough.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's super powerful for me. One thing you said there was, the role of a healthcare professional in general and helping people kind of challenge those worldviews. So one thing I know as well about you is that you were an adjunct professor at Touro University.
That's correct.
So one thing that I think is amazing about that is you're not only impacting the patient experience and helping them change their worldview, but you're also molding the future healthcare professionals that come into the space as well.
That's correct.
So let's talk about that mindset perspective, because I know healthcare in general today has become a real, I would say, churn business, right? We get people in, we get people out. And sometimes the role of a healthcare provider, healthcare professional, is to challenge that worldview. So how are you influencing the mindset of new healthcare professionals that are coming into the space? What is the emphasis of recognizing that their patients are humans and that you have to kind of help them navigate? What is like your mindset when it comes to influencing the new generation?
Yeah, so I think, Keenan, when you were talking about your knee, when you had that injury, that was your first time that you had had an injury of that nature. And I'm sure a lot of things were going through your mind. Am I ever going to run again, walk again? Am I ever going to do the things that I was able to do again? You were in a state of confusion about what the future looked like. As a physical therapist who's been doing what I do for a very long time, this is probably, if you had come to see me, it would have been my 100th time that I've seen something like this. So this is where you start when you educate young clinicians. Is my experience as a clinician, having seen this a million times, for the lack of better terminology, should not translate into what the patient is feeling, because this is their first time. So you have to bring yourself down to being that it's their first time that they're going through this. How are they feeling right now? And how can I get myself to the point where, one, I can encourage them to keep on going, have them realize that what they're going through is nothing different or out of the ordinary for people who've gone through an injury like this. And then reaffirm them that I'm going to be here every step of the way. When it comes down to it, that's I tell my students that a simple gesture like putting your hand on your patient for the entire duration of the time that you're treating your patient reaffirms that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. If you pick up bad habits like turning away from your patient and writing everything or getting on your computer and typing while your patient is, doing whatever it is they're doing back there, you've disconnected from the patient. But looking at them in the eye, giving them that confidence that you are there, and then making sure that they get time to ask questions and you have the answers. And if you don't, again, don't make stuff up. Just tell them, hey, listen, that's a good question. Not the guy, but I'm going to find an answer for you. So my role in molding the next group or the next cohort of therapists specifically is to have them realize that the human being that's in front of you has put all their trust in you, but also realize that they've been let down by so many other people like you. There's a physician, there's somebody who came in, flew in and flew out, didn't explain a thing. But you have an opportunity to make that right. And this is your opportunity. Do it right, not only for yourself and your patient, but for everyone else who's come in and not answered the questions and given the right answers that they needed. So
that sense of empathy is something that I think is so critical, especially as a clinician, a healthcare professional in general, recognizing that, like you said, this is the first time that somebody's coming into a new environment. It's scary. And you need to build that trust is super important. I want to use that word of empathy to kind of start pivoting towards your venture of Hutano. So empathy in healthcare, super important. Not only from the clinician patient engagement perspective, but also the entire experience.
Right.
And I realized that in order for us to create the best healthcare experience, we have to have empathy for everybody as they go through the entire process.
Correct.
So you coming from an IT background, what type of problems did you recognize in the space when it came to the patient experience and just overall patient journey that made you kind of create Hutano in the first place? And what type of challenges were you looking to kind of solve with that?
How much time do we have?
We got a lot of time.
No, and that's a very good question. From an IT standpoint, I think what was glaring in my face as soon as I walked into healthcare was the inefficiency of how the code was written. So I give an example of my first electronic medical record system that would not let me write more than 256 characters in a box. Well, for those of us who are computer engineers, we know that that's because you use the wrong input type. And this was way back in the day. You used an input type that allows you 256 characters. You need to find one that gives you unlimited number of characters. But this was a problem that clinicians had just come to live with and say, it's just the way it is. I said, well, if the story I need to tell about my patient is more than 256 characters, what do you want me to do? So there were so many of these examples of problems that were fixable, but the problem was the solution was made by someone who doesn't take care of patients, and they don't understand that I do need to tell my story about what's going on with my patient without any limitations of number of characters.
Right.
And the people who approve the software are people who don't know anything about computer engineering or software engineering. So they look at the solution and they go, oh, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
This car has 2 wheels and that's the way it is. We're just going to drive it like that. And you go, no, you could put 4 on it and that'll be much better. This is a motorcycle. It's not. So anyways, that's, there were many examples of that. And that's what propelled me to, let's just do something about it. I can't fix the problem, but I could create something that makes more sense.
Right. And it takes a real sense of confidence in yourself to challenge the status quo, because my experience in healthcare got started back in 2014. And I recognize that the healthcare solutions, especially from a tech perspective as a documentation tool in EHR, has always been created in a vacuum, like you said, created by somebody who's not in front of the patient. And you have a unique background and skill set as somebody who's in IT who can actually write code, and recognizing there's so much room for improvement here.
Right.
So what is the mindset? Was there like a critical moment where you were like, enough is enough? We can't deal with this anymore? Walk us through kind of like that aha moment of like, I got to do something about this problem.
Yeah. So it was really kind of the time when Uber came around, and I just said, life has changed, man.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm getting the same treatment that the very wealthy used to get, where they could just call on somebody to come pick them up. Like, I want you here in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, gosh, I remember the days when you would call the taxi company the day before to come and pick you up at 4:00 in the morning. You go to the airport.
Everything was scheduled out, right?
It was scheduled out. The guy showed up, just about done near killed you on the way to the airport. He demanded a tip, and the car was not great. It was, there was a barrier between you and the driver, and a little tag that said what his name was. It was a very, the experience was just not great, right? And all of a sudden, I have this experience where the driver says, is the temperature okay?
Yeah.
And I'm going, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. Are you putting my
Would you like
first?
some water? I'm like, this is nice. And by the way, this is less expensive than that taxi ride that almost killed you to the airport. Yeah. The experience just changed my way of looking at how we solve problems. And was there a problem with the old taxi system? No, actually, it worked fine. They picked you up and they dropped you off. If your objective was to get to the airport, they got you there.
Right.
But this new experience changed not only the convenience of when I could get a taxi, but also created a whole new industry for people who had cars that are sitting in their driveway doing absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah.
Those people could be put to work. That's when I said healthcare has got to change. Something about the customer experience as it is right now, where you wait an average of 22 days to see your primary care provider and only to get 5.2 minutes with that doctor when you get into the clinic.
5.2 minutes.
Yeah,
after
that's
a
what it's come down
22-day wait.
Yeah. In Boston, it's 66 days. I don't know what's going on on the East Coast, but but it's a long time. It's a long time. So, and in that period of time, you've got options, right? Because you have something happen to you right now, you believe you're going to die.
Yeah.
So the only option is to go to the most expensive point in the healthcare system, which is the emergency department.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're inundated with cases that seemingly to medically trained people are not emergent situations.
Yeah.
But for me as the patient on this day, this toe that I just hurt might fall off.
Right.
I am going to go and get assistance like right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really it's that time period that changed my way of thinking about the patient experience. How can we change that? But also on the back end, the clinician experience wasn't that great. We were spending so much time documenting, defensively for that matter.
Right.
The average now is 16 minutes of documentation versus the 5.2 minutes of seeing the patient. So it's 3 times as much time writing stuff as it is actually seeing the patient. So it doesn't make any sense.
No.
If we could flip that over, that would make sense. 16 minutes of talking to a patient for 5 minutes of documentation would be great, but we're trying to shoot for something even better than that, where patients just get enough time to have face-to-face with their doctors.
Yeah, and build that relationship. That trust
Right.
is so important.
Exactly.
So here's a question for you. So when you recognize this problem in the patient experience, customer experience of healthcare, naturally, did you go to the place of thinking that you had to build an entire new system of how we interacted with patients instead of going tech first? Did you ever have that type of mindset? Because often, when I think about change in healthcare, naturally, it almost feels like we have to move a mountain to get people to do things differently. So changing the way we access healthcare, trusted advisors, we access trusted resources, has always been a very human capital intensive, like you talked about. We only, from an education perspective as the patient, know that we should, in emergency, go to the ER. Right. And changing that mentality of the patient experience in itself seems like we have to reinvent the whole healthcare system, which is a big challenge.
So and this is what we were told in the beginning. You are moving a mountain. Everybody who's been in this space has failed.
So who's telling you this?
This is everybody from investors to anybody that you talked about. I'm trying to build a health tech company. I mean, they look at you and they go, "You're trying to build the moon on Mars. That's what you're trying to do. It's difficult. It's complicated. There are companies with bigger pockets than you that have tried this and have failed." And then you go back and you go, Airbnb, that didn't even exist many years ago.
Yeah.
And there are many big companies that could have started this company that didn't. So why not now?
Right.
So what we found that was really interesting was nobody ever defined what accessing healthcare actually is. Like when you tell me it's difficult, tell me what are the steps and what are the difficult parts of each step. I never heard that story at all. Everybody would just go straight to insurance companies. Well, insurance companies. I go, no, well, but it's a transaction between a patient who needs a service and a clinician who can provide the service. You're telling me that is so complicated that we can't get these two together and just do what they do? I can call my plumber right now and say my sink is clogged. He does his thing. I have the money. He comes in and we do our thing, or she, whatever. But that's how we looked at it, was to go back and say, what is it that we're trying to solve? And once we defined it, yes, we had to recreate the whole thing from top to bottom because of constraints that we shall discuss in a little bit.
I mean, so my question is when we're creating a new venture, right, there's almost like a peak and a valley that people go through when you're starting a new initiative. Often it's uninformed optimism because you're like, we're going to change the world. And then you start getting in front of investors, people who have been in the space. I would like to call these people legacy mindset holders, who are like, you guys need to kind of tone it down because you're trying to build the moon on Mars, like you said. And that creates an informed, almost like pessimism of like, oh, maybe this isn't going to be as easy. So how did you kind of fortify your mindset and the team's mindset to be like, we're tackling a challenge that's going to be worth it, and this is why we're going to be tackling this? What was that like for you guys?
So spent about 400 hours of listening to podcasts from all kinds of business people, from Bill Gates to Brian Chesky. I mean, and in some of the stories I can remember like almost word for word because I listened to them at least 3 or 4 times. And I found out that the people who really change the world are people who go against the grain. Mm-hmm. So based on that, I realized that there are very intelligent people who just don't know what they're talking about. And once you get to that realization that there's an investor out there who has, billions of dollars deep in their pockets, but when it comes down to your business and your passion and what drives you to make what you're making, the advice, as good as it is, they just don't know this space as well as they think they do. I am a clinician and I'm an IT guy. That's got to mean something. So the confidence you build in yourself that I think I know this problem better than the guy that's got deep pockets but has never treated a patient before and has never written a line of code, but has looked at many, many businesses in this space, and this is the conclusion that they've come to. You have to dig in at some point and say, this is my vision, this is my road, and this is where I'm going. And along the way, you are going to start converting some skeptics, especially in the investor world, that go, you know what, I'm going to go with this guy. I know he's crazy in thinking that this is going to work, but why not? Let's, he looks confidently crazy. Let's do it.
I think that's something that is incredibly powerful in 2 folds there, because you have to challenge the worldview that people have if you're going to do things differently. Right. I always love going back to the quote of like, if you do things the same way, you're going to get the same results. And doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is literally insanity.
Exactly.
Defined by Einstein himself. So your role as founder CEO, right? You kind of have to be that evangelist, that crazy person who believes enough in your idea to convince others. Were there ever times in the early days when you kind of came against resistance and had to kind of like have that conversation with yourself of, these people don't believe, but I'm going to make this happen anyway? What was that like?
Oh my gosh, we had so many of those. So I remember a gentleman that I had a meeting with, and he was affiliated with AZ16. He knew the people in that organization that have the big money, right? I mean, you're talking Andreessen and Horowitz, and these are $1 billion guys. And I had this meeting with him, and he says, where you really need to go is you need to go to billing. That's where the money is. And I was trying to be really kind. I said, well, we don't have any domain expertise in that, which is another way of saying I'm not doing that.
To the guy with the checkbook.
It's not my thing. He says, but no, I have names of these people. If you were doing billing, they would be very interested. I said, still, we don't have any domain expertise. We're not doing it.
Something that so many, I would say, founders and entrepreneurs end up caving to, which is a huge problem.
Yeah.
Somebody with a checkbook says, I believe you guys should be moving in this direction. It kind of takes you out of alignment.
I call it founder prostitution. You sleep with the guy that has the money under their terms. Like, I want
to write that down.
Exactly. But it's so in the continuum of your company from inception to wherever you end up, if you keep on prostituting, the next person that has a big check comes in and gives you a great idea. You run with that idea, abandoning some of your core beliefs and where this company was supposed to go in the first place. You can only do that for so long. Again, like prostitution, you will never feel connected to the vision of your company. You will always be wavering. So I think there comes a time where a founder has to say, I would rather have failed having run this vision my way than succeed on somebody else's terms. And that's kind of a place I reached a long time ago.
That's an incredibly powerful mindset to come to, but I know a lot of people don't have the mental fortitude to do those things, especially in the world of like trying to raise money.
Right.
We're always trying to convince somebody. And I feel like sometimes it's easy to get off of our why in order to get people to, like you said, kind of come and lay in bed with us so we can use their money and their resources.
Right. Exactly. And, we find all kinds of reasons why it's okay to do that. But in the long run, I've never found it to be satisfying having taken somebody's check and then go, we'll do this thing to satisfy the check they gave me, even though I really hate this thing.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason why I'm a founder of my own company and I'm not clocking in and clocking out somewhere else, is because I decided to do something I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So to betray yourself like that is something that you will regret eventually. If not now, you will eventually regret it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about kind of the vision for Hutano.
Sure.
And how do you get other people behind your vision for impacting healthcare? So what were some of the early conversations that you had with team members, early founders, co-founders, or whoever's a part of your team? What was that kind of like of articulating the vision for a better patient experience and all the things that you guys do at Hutano?
Yeah. So I think the first sell we had was, and everybody can just relate to this. How long did it take to see your doctor the last time you went to the doctor? And they look at you and they go, oh my gosh. It's almost like picking at a scab that was starting to heal, right? Mm-hmm. It's just painful. And I would walk through solutions that are already in the marketplace, everything from Uber to Grubhub to whatever. And I say, you're telling me that I can get my pizza in a predetermined time, but I can't get my health care that is more important than my pizza? What is the difference between those two? And so breaking it down, especially for my co-founder, Scott, I just say, come on, Scott, there's got to be something we can do to get a patient in front of a clinician as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. And we found out that most of it was just really a mindset. Like people just believe this is the way it is. You go to the DMV, you just expect to sit there for like 3 days before anybody sees you.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And we're saying, does it really have to be that way? I mean, could they just send me a text 3 days later and have me come and wait for 5 minutes? Yeah, they could do that. But, I guess they like building big buildings and having people just sit there and sit around, right? So it's the sell for me to my initial investors, was clear and palpable to them, and especially those who were clinicians. They really knew the pain points of trying to document and trying to get all these things together. The team members, I didn't have to do much selling at all. I mean, everybody just was like, if we could make this work, let's make it work. And at that time, I had kind of a nice little prototype that kind of showed you click here, you do this. And everybody was like, yeah, I think this might work.
Yeah.
It might work.
Which is a huge nod to, tackling a problem and being able to present an idea and getting people to buy into it.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you're tackling a common human experience, like I would do the exact same thing. How long did you wait for your doctor last time you went to the office? Naturally, that creates all the emotions and all the feelings of like, I had to get a babysitter, I had to cancel a meeting, I went in there an hour early, I waited in the waiting room for 45 minutes to only see my doctor for 5.2 minutes.
Right.
Which is crazy.
The return on investment is pretty poor.
It's wild. And it's crazy to think that we've been operating in this space of healthcare for so long, and there's not innovation like what you guys are doing to be able to kind of push us forward.
Right. And that's when we demo this, like we just did yesterday to a couple of investors, it's so simple, yet you're asking yourself, are you really telling me nobody else has come up with a solution? And we go, no, not really. It's just something that nobody has really thought of doing or doing it to this extent. It's the world we live in. So thanks, because that kind of helped us get where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about kind of what pieces of technology you guys have integrated into the platform. I would say, normal consumer experiences. Uber was a great example that you gave in the very beginning. What type of elements are you trying to bring into the patient experience that makes you guys so different?
Yeah, so the first part is using the very curated search features. Because if you think about the friction that we have with getting to a doctor in the first place, walk into a new city, you don't know anyone, you haven't established a relationship with anyone, you don't have a plumber or roofer or anything, you don't have a doctor, right? If we say, if you hurt yourself, you're not feeling well in the middle of the night, and everybody says, go see a doctor, how do you find one? It is difficult. I mean, it's almost an impossible task. So people are left with, you go to Google. Google shows you the people that paid a lot of money, SEO. They're at the top, but they're also 15 miles away from your house. and they're not taking any patients. And you don't know if they take your insurance. I mean, there's all these barriers. So it leads to a bunch of phone calls that lead to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we say is that problem needs to be fixed. It's already been fixed in other places, right? So we just took solutions from other industries and we say, okay, so I should be able to go in and with my app or the website, just go in and say, I'm looking for a doctor who practices family medicine. Show me the ones that are within a 5-mile radius of where I live. Boom, there you are. Or I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm looking for somebody who works on, I don't know, skin. Well, you type that, it shows you people that do dermatology and other specialties that work on that part of the body. Or maybe you know the name of the doctor. Somebody told me it was Dr. Makuve somewhere. Mm-hmm. Type in Makuve and boom, there he is. So that's and that technology has been around since the 2000s, right? And then from there on, well, I found them. Now what? Well, I need to book the appointment. But I also need to find out, do they take my insurance? Mm-hmm. If I don't have insurance or I have the high deductible, how much is it for me to pay cash? All the cash prices are displayed, including the insurance.
Wow.
I get to make the decision on whether I want to pull the trigger on this or not.
Yep.
Again, I'm saving the clinician a bunch of money in employing people to pick up the phone and answer stupid questions. Questions that really can be answered by a platform, right?
And isn't that what we expect as modern day consumers, to be able to go out, gather information, and make knowledgeable decisions rather than having to play phone tag and call around and check for insurance and is this okay and blah blah. You know what I mean?
And even further than that, the overhead that's involved in answering phones and just all the stuff that goes on in the back that we call back office in clinics is so expensive, but at the expense of the patient. Because there's only one person who does the paying in healthcare. Mm-hmm. It's the patient, nobody else. So if they have a team of 50 people in the back verifying insurance and answering calls and all that cost, you bundle it all together, it's going to be put on the patients.
Yes.
So that's trying to illuminate that to physicians and clinicians who typically don't get their degrees in tandem with an MBA. It's usually go out there and figure out how it works. Yeah. And the only way it works, or the only way to mitigate for any expenses, is to just hire more people and see more patients. So back to our problem of, now that we've gotten the patient, we've figured out what insurance is the doctor takes, how much it costs. I'm okay with this doctor. I've reviewed all the user reviews from other people who've, they have raving reviews of this guy. He's just 2 miles away from my house. Now the next problem is, can I book an appointment? Well, you can see their schedule and it's right in front of you. They're available tomorrow at 3:00. If that works with me, I'm going to book that time. But the biggest problem that we find is paperwork. I booked the appointment. I come to the doctor's office. Now I'm going to sit for 45 minutes watching HGTV and just filling out stuff, right? So what we do next is just have them fill out that paperwork on the platform. It's just interactive, like, what hurts, left, right, whatever. You go through the whole process. By the time you're done, you literally have everything and more information than you would have normally had when you went to the doctor for the first time. We're asking you questions as if the doctor was asking the question. And the doctor is having a heads up on what's going on before you even walk in. You get to review what's going on. You get to know what you're up against before your patient even walks in. Again, adding an element of efficiency that doesn't exist in this industry at this point. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how we went through the process of figuring out what needs to be solved where, and then how do we prioritize that? And the only way that it's been done up to this point is find one problem, fix that problem, and then hope that somebody else is going to fix the next problem down the road. Yes. And that you can interact with that software in some ways. And that's where I lost a lot of big money investors who I'm sure they will come in when we have an IPO, but
with a smile on your face
because
too.
They kept on saying, you're doing too much. This is way too much. But the fact of the matter is, you cannot build a healthcare platform without solving all the problems in whatever space you're solving. We're solving for outpatient care. If you're going to go into the hospital system, you cannot solve it by just solving for one problem, because who's going to solve the other problems? And what if the company that's solving the problem two down from where you are goes out of business in 5 years' time, then what?
I mean, this is the exact problem that we see in healthcare in general, right? These solutions are problem-oriented. They solve it in a vacuum. They roll it out to a healthcare system or a provider themselves, and they say, good luck with the next problem. So I love how you guys are tactically kind of tackling all the challenges that a patient could face as they're coming into the office, which creates a better continuum of experience long-term, which is incredible. Because how many times, and I just want to go back to it, have I shown up at a doctor's office and unfortunately they don't have the paperwork that I filled out previously, and now I have to sit there for 35 minutes and I'm past my appointment time. Then I get into the doctor. It's just like a compounding effect of inefficiency.
Right.
And I really see you guys tackling all those challenges.
Yeah. And I think when you look at it more globally, and this is where I think public officials need to look at the problem holistically and see how it's impacting this country. You go back to the DMV problem, right? When you have 1,200 people sitting in the DMV for an average of 6 hours, multiply all that out, and those are people that could be making tacos and filling out potholes. They could be doing things that really have an impact in the world. But here they are sitting, literally looking at something that says G22 at window number 3. I'm like, why? Why are we doing this for this long? So same thing with healthcare. You know, you and I are fairly young that we can navigate the system and be boisterous enough to stand for our rights. But we have senior citizens who are in their 80s and 90s who have way more problems than we have. And we are demanding that those people at their ages should get in a vehicle, drive to a doctor's office, do all these things that we find very difficult, and do it 3 or 4 times every single month. And we wonder why they end up in the hospital so many times. It's because they just say, you know, screw it. I'm just going to stay at home. If it gets really bad, I'll call 911. The firefighters are good looking. They'll come pick me up off the floor. One of my patients used to say that. The firefighters are very good looking. They'll come pick me up. So it's a self-perpetuating problem that really has an impact that's far-reaching into the economy of this country, because there's a lot of unproductive hours that are spent with people sitting doing absolutely nothing when they could be doing something else.
Yeah. And one of the things that, you know, I think about in general when it comes to the adoption of technology is often there's a perspective that, especially in healthcare, because it's been the way it's always been, we have to continue to do the same things that we've always been doing, which is going to give us the same results, right? And when you hear about Uber, or we hear about these other technologies, these are not things that have just like popped up all of a sudden, but now we have a demographic base of people who understand how to use these technologies, but we've also experienced the efficiencies that they create in our lives.
Right.
So why should we not integrate those experiences into the healthcare platforms that we go to engage with our trusted healthcare providers?
Right.
And I think that's only like the next step. And I think we do people a disservice by expecting them to do things the old way when the world presents it in a more efficient manner.
Right. No, very, very true. And there are sectors of healthcare that have done a good job. If you look at cosmetic surgeries, for example, mostly because those are cash-based businesses that don't depend on anything but the capitalistic forces of this country that say, if you have higher efficiency, you can lower the cost and you can attract more business. If you're more efficient and you can provide better service, you're more likely to get more business from your existing customers. Whereas regular healthcare works like the IRS. You can always tax more. Okay, you don't have to have good service at all. It's what are your options here, right? It's the IRS or the IRS, and if you don't, we'll put you in jail. And in this case, what choices do you have with your healthcare? I can't shop around. I'm not feeling good. If the ER is packed and the wait time is 14 hours. It's 14 hours. I can't change that. Whereas technology, without changing much, can change the inefficiencies that already exist in the system and shorten that 14 hours to sometimes 14 minutes. You'd be surprised at how much of that 14 hours is really just inefficient. There are people who are sitting in this ER that shouldn't have been here in the first place. They are sitting in front of people who really need to be here. if technology could shuttle and put people in the right places at the right time, the person that has diabetes that's uncontrolled, that's now in the ER, if that person could have seen their primary care physician, say 3 or 4 months ago, on time and regularly enough, they wouldn't be sitting in this emergency department.
Exactly.
So that's where technology holistically starts changing the narrative on and start moving the needle on public health and what we're seeing as a problem in the US right now.
Absolutely. One of the things I want to talk about, and this is something that caught my attention when we first started speaking together, you mentioned a feature inside of the platform of notifying your doctor when you're on the way. A simple efficiency, but from my perspective as a patient, as a healthcare consumer, makes so much sense.
Right.
So why don't you talk about like that feature in general and how it impacts the overall experience of both the healthcare provider, the clinician, but also the patient as well.
Yeah. So this came as one of those. I woke up in the morning. I said, waiting rooms make no sense to me. Like this is real estate that just doesn't need to exist. Because by the time somebody comes to your office, you should know they're coming to your office, and they shouldn't be there so long that they're drinking cups of coffee. Okay, these are all resources.
Snacks and everything. Yeah.
just get them in, get them to do the business they need, and walk away. So the way it works on our platform is, well, once a patient sets up an appointment with a provider, we send them a series of notifications. If it's outside of 24 hours, within 24 hours, hey, you got an appointment with Dr. Makuve. Are you going to make it to this appointment? If not, please reschedule the appointment. Here's a button for you to click to reschedule. So we make it super convenient for them to just do what they want to do and without having to pick up the phone. But when it comes to that 2-hour window where they're about to go to the office, we send them one last notification that says, hey, it's going to take about 32 minutes for you to get from here to the doctor's office.
So you guys have a map in your platform as well.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. So we're geo-mapping between the doctor's office and the patient. And so they go, oh, okay, well, I guess. And then we just tell them, when you're ready, please click here to let us know that you're on the way. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, the first time it happened with one of my patients, I was like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah, exactly.
So then they basically open the app and they click, I'm driving. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they do that, the office gets a notification that says, your patient Keenan is on his way, which gives me as a clinician, not only a heads up that my patient is on their way, but get my act together. I got 32 minutes for this guy to get here. I don't want him to sit in my waiting room doing absolutely nothing.
Right.
If I'm backed up, say 15 minutes or 20 minutes behind, I can just text or I can call the patient in the platform and say, hey, why don't you hang back about 15 minutes? We're not ready for you yet.
Right.
The main reasons why patients would need to come in early don't even exist anymore on Hutano. They've already filled out their paperwork. They may have even taken their own vitals at home. They don't need all this stuff. They don't need to come in and just sit down and do nothing. And then when your patient gets to the clinic, they just push a little thing that says, I've arrived, which is a way for them to check in. Now, what's really cool about this, I kid you not, I borrowed this from Amazon. Because when you look at your package, right, it shows you the order has been placed.
Yep.
And then it shows you it's being processed. And there's a little line that shows you it's shipped. And nowadays they have this thing that says it's on its way. And they tell you it's 4 stops away from your house. So I didn't have to recreate the wheel. I was like, wouldn't that be nice if as a clinician I could see where my patient is in their journey to come to see me. And then once they see me, where they are in the journey to getting their documentation or the next step. So that's basically how it works.
I mean, it's I have a big belief in modeling, right? Modeling what other successful businesses have done for the overall consumer experience and then integrating those tools into your overall experience. You know what I mean? Like success leaves clues.
Right.
If Amazon is so successful, they're obviously leaving clues about their overall experience. And why should we not be modeling those things in things like healthcare?
Why reinvent the wheel? I mean, they did a good job of it. It's a feature that I enjoy. And not only that, it's a feature that's now become familiar with a lot of people, right? Everybody knows how that works. You look at your app and you go, oh yeah, my package is 4 stops away from my house. Right. We're good. So how about looking at your app and going, my patient is 5 minutes from getting to my office. I need to get them ready. That to me just makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it's just like the common consumer expectation. You know what I mean? And this is where I think organizations and innovative platforms like Hutano really have an opportunity to make an impact, because it's taking the common experience that we have on a daily basis and then putting it into healthcare. And that's something that people have been asking for so long, but that legacy mindset of this is how things have been done forever is going to give us the same results that we've always done.
Very true. What got us here will not get us there.
Yeah, exactly. So as we kind of start pivoting towards the future, so what are some of the challenges that you're facing in healthcare right now? I know we have a lot of elements, when I kind of referenced this earlier, but healthcare has become really kind of like a turnover, a churn business. Get people in as quick as possible and then get them out. You're helping efficiencies from both sides of the patient experience, but also the provider as well, which is incredibly powerful. But how do you think some of the, I would say, business forces of the marketplace are fortifying the need for your guys' solution? So I kind of say that to say, in our earlier conversation we had before recording the podcast, you had mentioned that sometimes you have to reframe the business practices of the businesses and organizations that you support as well. How are some of the efficiencies of Hutano affecting the way people make money from a practice perspective and the efficiencies that come along with that?
Yeah. So I think we've discovered this almost immediately, that most clinicians are not very good at math.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to their money and how they make money. Mm-hmm. So a clinician who relies heavily on insurance business to support their business, to get business through the door. Now, remember, a clinician practice is no different from a guy selling cookies.
Right.
The more people come in the store and buy cookies, the more money you make. It's as simple as that. The more hours you're open, the more money you make, but also the more overhead you have. But in this case, insurance companies are a vehicle to get patients in the door and out of the door. What has been lost in this equation is, I equate it to the automotive insurance business, right? You buy a vehicle today, you insure it, and you have $1,000 deductible and full coverage on it. Mm-hmm. I'm in $1,000 if I have a fender bender right here on Eastern. However, if my car gets totaled, I still pay the $1,000.
Right.
But the rest of it to replace the vehicle is going to be covered by the insurance. Insurance is important, but it's important for the big one, not for the small issues. Mm-hmm. So educating consumers that maintenance of your body and making sure that you're in tip-top shape should not be something that's, one, too expensive for you to do, and secondly, it should be within reach, and it should be something that you can pay for out of pocket. That's where we start. But this conversation can start in doctors' offices as well, because every time a patient walks in and presents an insurance card, there's an army of people that have to be involved in making sure that this patient, one, is eligible for the services that are going to be provided, that they have the right benefits or they have met their deductibles. There's all these things that need to be done. But like I said in the beginning, the only person that pays for all those people is the patient.
Yeah.
So when the patient wonders why it's so expensive, I go back to this thing where you came in for this service that I could have easily charged you $60 for. But because you put it through this engine that requires 20 people to touch, now it's going to cost you $150.
Yeah, that's like a legacy business.
Right.
Kind of
so there's a legacy business that's attached, but it's so unnecessary in a number of ways. It's the equivalent of the plumber coming over to my house and me going, to put a garbage disposal, a new one, I'm going to run that through my insurance company. I mean, that would be it doesn't make any sense, right? Mm-hmm. The guy's going to say, it's $75 for my time and $180 for the new garbage disposal. Here you go.
Right.
And my argument to most clinicians is that you can make the same argument to your patients about the value of what you're doing. The important thing about a cash exchange between a patient and a patient and a provider is that I have to provide service equal or above what you just gave me in monetary value. Mm-hmm. And you'll find that clinicians that now start to use our model of business, which is get as many patients as you can to use a less expensive model of business, which is give me cash, write a check, whatever it is, drop some chickens off before you leave, are obviously going to get much better service from me, because instead of the 5.2 minutes, which is obviously ridiculous, if you just gave me $100 out of your pocket, mm-hmm. I'm going to give you 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of not only treatment time, but education time. And it comes down to this, because you mentioned this before, creating a relationship with someone requires time.
Yes.
Without time, you cannot have a relationship. Most patients in this day and age are different from patients 50 or 60 years ago in only one way. They don't have a relationship with their doctor. Therefore, they don't trust what their doctor does. That's why when they walk out of the doctor's office, they're Googling what the guy just said. What does this mean? I don't know. They're calling somebody else. He said this. I don't know what this means. It means they didn't get enough time to understand, and they don't have a trust factor. So that's what we are trying to turn around, is get clinicians to understand that the more time you give to your patients, the better the health outcomes are going to be for your patients. Because now all of a sudden, instead of just taking out a prescription pad and giving them another medication or changing the medication they're on, you can actually sit down with them and talk to them about how they got here. How did you get diabetes? How does that actually work? What does the pancreas do in your body? How is it that the food that I eat affects the amount of insulin that goes in and out of my body? And how does it get depleted to a point where now I'm diabetic? How can I reverse that process? But more importantly, how many times do I need to see you, and what do I need to do personally to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Those conversations take time, and they take time over a long period of time. Patients always want to impress their clinicians.
Yeah.
Most of my patients want to come back and say, "Doc, you don't believe what I'm doing now. I'm walking without a cane," right? Same with patients that come in with these chronic diseases. They want to come back and say, "Doc, you wouldn't believe I've lost 10 pounds. I feel so much better." But if you're not having enough time to even have the discussion about how to get there, it's just never going to happen. They're just not going to move the needle at all in healthcare.
It takes me back to the earlier analogy you gave when you were talking about your PT practice of building on those small incremental wins until you can create a big windfall.
Right.
And in healthcare today specifically, I think about the big windfall as being retention.
Right.
Because if we have an established relationship with our healthcare provider, then we have a relationship that will last long term. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that healthcare systems in general that have a big churn model is I'm here to make sure I get my billable moments down with you. I'm going to spend my 16 minutes documenting, and then I'll catch you next time.
Right.
But nobody really wants that experience today from the patient side because, like you said, we all wish we had that, I would say, previous generation's healthcare experience where I could lean into my doctor, lean into their expertise. They're a trusted resource of information, and I don't leave completely baffled after I leave that environment. And I think that's going to be the long-term success of healthcare in general, especially as we start moving away from like fee-for-service models and we start getting into value-based models.
Right.
Being able to leverage that relationship is going to be the thing that's going to help people win long-term.
Oh, absolutely. I think, this is a human contact business, right? You cannot, there's no substitute for it. I am fortunate as a physical therapist that I have to spend a sizable amount of time with my patients, training them on what to do, how to do it correctly, and then the next session I'm going, hey, from what we did last time, what worked and what didn't work. There's kind of as a physical therapist, I'm forced to have a relationship with my patients, and even in our field, we're starting to see a creep of less time with the patient and having support staff spend more time with my patients. And that's again, going back to why I teach, is to try and teach the next generation of therapists that's unacceptable. You're the doctor, you're the person with a name on the door. You spend the time with your patients. They need to walk away knowing that the direction of this care was driven by the person that has the name on the door. But you are absolutely right. I think as we figure out how to spend more time with our patients, health outcomes will inevitably get better.
Yep. And that's it brings you up I've been recently speaking with my dad who back in 2021, December, was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he's gone through the process of targeted radiation treatment and everything like that. But I will always remember the initial experience he had when he was given his diagnosis. He was given that diagnosis by a PA who was not his doctor. And so this guy came in who was his PA and just very bluntly was like, here's the information. And to this day, he still continues to talk about how uninterested his primary provider was in giving him that news. And he still talks about it to this day. He went in for a checkup last Monday to ask about like, what is his new regimen of exercise? Can he talk about, testosterone replacement therapy, stuff like that, to get back to himself? And the first thing he said was, if that PA comes in the room and tries to talk to me, I'm going to have to say, I need to see my doctor. But it's just like the emphasis of the relationship is so important with your trusted healthcare professional. It just really matters.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear that, and that's I think that's the reason why we really need to shift from focusing on money and focusing on people. Healthcare has always been about people.
Yeah.
It's how you impact the person in front of you. You may have seen 10,000 prostate cancer cases, but for your dad, it was his first time.
Yep.
You have to treat it as that. You have to treat it as if you were talking to your mom, your dad, or somebody that matters to you. But it's unacceptable that the physician doesn't make the time to speak to his patient to say, hey, this is the diagnosis we have, but here's the good news. This is what we can help you with. Here are the outcomes that we possibly could be facing. But it just comes down to time. These folks are inundated with paperwork. They probably spend more time doing paperwork on that day than they could have spent talking to your dad about something that's not only life-changing for him, but something to this day he still talks about, because it's a mistrust in the healthcare system that he's built. And he's told everybody he knows that this is just, so bad news spreads like wildfire. And unfortunately in healthcare, we are short of good news that everybody has had such a bad experience for something that costs so much.
Yeah.
It should be better.
I agree. And it's just like people like you who are tackling these challenges with a sense of, I would say, keen empathy is something that I want to congratulate you for. And that's why I thought it was so important to get you on the show, because you are making the challenges or making the changes that people need to have a more trust-based relationship with the trusted people in our communities who can actually give them the information that they need to live their best life. And I just want to say thank you for that.
No, thank you. We're happy to share the story, and it's when we have conversations with folks like you that we not only get the validation that what we're doing matters, but also find out other things that we could help the healthcare system kind of start to realize that technology has always saved humanity whenever there has been a challenge. And the challenge that we face today is unique in that people are living much longer. We have an interesting ecosystem where food is sometimes the poison that causes us to repeatedly go in and out of the healthcare system. So we have more people living on the planet, and we just don't have the resources to take care of every one of them. But technology is amazing at not only making some things efficient, but also disseminating information that could help patients literally across the board. As this podcast is going to air, people who've never heard my voice or heard your voice will be able to sit in this room with us and participate in this conversation. We could do the same thing for healthcare. There are many people out there who have real deep questions that could be answered by technology that we could answer in that format. But there's also people that just need to see someone who's a professional that's been trained in the disease process, build a relationship with them, and then start a path to wellness that is curated by somebody who knows what they're doing. These are coaches that are sitting on the bench that have not yet stood up to coach their team. Every physician, every clinician, their job is to make sure that the outcome of this game is the best outcome possible. But if we just put them in a corner and say, go do paperwork, write about the game, but don't coach the team or don't coach the players, it's a losing game. And we shouldn't be surprised when, every player is going in different directions and there's no real curated way to attack the problem of childhood obesity because of early onset of diabetes in kids that we never used to see way in the day, right? 9 years old, they've got diabetes, and you go, well, that's odd, but here we are. No, just give them meds; they'll be fine. Yeah. That just doesn't work. We need to cut that and change that over. But thank you so much for saying that. I think we are just one company amongst many that will come before us and ones that have paved the way for us. That might make the difference in the future to get this problem curbed in a way that makes sense.
Well, I think you guys are already making the difference that we need, right? It's those small incremental wins with organizations like yours, technology like yours, that compound into the big windfall that we're going to see, I'm sure, sometime in the future. I think you've done an amazing job of really articulating what the overall, I would say, emphasis of this podcast is, talking about the heart of where you believe there was an opportunity to win, and then talking about the hustle that it really takes to actually implement that and really make the difference that people are looking for in today's world. So I want to use the last couple seconds here for you to talk about Hutano and where people can find more information. If they want to reach out to you, where can they contact you at, and where does that kind of stuff look like?
Sure. Yeah. So you can go, obviously the website is the first place to go, www.hutano.com. The app is available for iOS and Android, and you can just get that on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Otherwise, you can find me personally. I'm on Facebook, so Facebook.com/Hutano, that's where I am. Or you can find me on Instagram at Hutano America, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm usually very active on LinkedIn. That's the place where I exist most of the time. And that's just LinkedIn/in/Hutano. So those are the places where you find me the most. And there's also a YouTube channel if you want to see some of my videos from before. And that's just Hutano is the channel. So that's how you find me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on the show, guys. That's been another episode of the Heart and Hustle podcast. Once again, Ephraim, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much.
Seriously, it's been amazing. Guys, that's another one. Check us in the next one.
Thank you.